The lecture hall was already tense before the professor even walked in. It was the kind of room where every cough echoed, every chair scrape felt louder than it should, and every student knew exactly where they stood in the unspoken hierarchy of brilliance. At the very top of that hierarchy was Professor Leonard Whitmore, a man famous not just for his genius in advanced mathematics, but for the way he made sure everyone knew it. He had taught at the university for over 20 years. He had published papers that students could barely pronounce, let alone understand. Rumor had it he'd once turned down an offer from MIT because he didn't want to waste his mind on people who weren't ready for it. Whether that was true or not, one thing was certain: Whitmore loved being feared. That morning, he stepped into the room carrying a stack of papers and a look of irritation. Without saying good morning, he dropped the papers onto the desk, turned to the board, and wrote a string of symbols so complex that half the class froze before he even finished the first line. Integrals wrapped around matrices. Greek letters crowded the edges. It looked less like an equation and more like a challenge carved into stone. Then Whitmore turned slowly toward the room. "Since some of you," he said, adjusting his glasses, "seem to think this course is too difficult because I move too quickly, I've decided to simplify things." A few nervous laughs slipped out. He scanned the room until his eyes landed on the back row. "Mr. Elijah Carter," he said. Elijah looked up from his notebook. Quiet, composed, and always early, Elijah had spent the semester trying not to stand out. He was one of the only black students in the department, and he knew exactly how quickly attention could turn into scrutiny. He wore the same calm expression he always did, but everyone near him noticed the shift in the room. Whitmore smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Perhaps you can help us," he said. "You've been awfully quiet. Let's see if that's because you're thoughtful, or because you're lost." The room went still. Elijah stood slowly. Whitmore gestured to the board. "Tell me, Mr. Carter. Can you solve it?" A few students lowered their eyes. Others leaned forward, sensing the cruelty before the question had even finished landing. This wasn't a normal classroom exercise. Whitmore had written something brutal on purpose, a problem no one in the room expected to solve under pressure, especially not in front of an audience waiting for a mistake. Elijah looked at the board for a long moment. Whitmore folded his arms. "Take your time. Though I imagine this may be a bit beyond your level." A sharp silence hit the room. That was the moment everyone understood what this really was. It wasn't about math anymore. It was about humiliation. Elijah walked to the front of the room, picked up the chalk, and stared at the equation. No rush. No panic. Just silence. Whitmore stood a few feet away, almost amused, like a man watching someone step into a trap he had spent years building. Then Elijah asked a question. "Professor," he said calmly, "did you derive this from your nonlinear symmetry paper, or from the revised version you never published?" The room changed instantly. Whitmore's expression tightened. "What did you say?" Elijah didn't look at him. His eyes were still on the board. "This structure here," he said, tapping one side of the equation, "matches the approach from your old theorem attempt. But the substitution in the second line suggests you later realized the boundary conditions collapse under the original assumption. So I'm asking which version you want solved." Nobody moved. Whitmore blinked once, hard. Because almost no one knew about that paper. Not the failed version. Not the revision. Not the decade-long obsession Whitmore had quietly chased in academic circles, trying to crack a proof that had destroyed his confidence more than once. He had never taught it. Never assigned it. Barely even mentioned it. And yet Elijah had recognized it in seconds. Whitmore tried to recover. "If you have something to say, Mr. Carter, say it clearly." Elijah nodded. "This equation doesn't fail because it's too difficult," he said. "It fails because the third transformation is built on a contradiction. You assumed convergence before proving stability. A murmur rippled through the class. Whitmore's face drained of color. Elijah lifted the chalk and began to write. At first, nobody understood what they were watching. His hand moved steadily, line after line, not like a student guessing, but like someone retracing steps he had already taken 100 times in his head. He erased one section of Whitmore's setup, replaced it with a cleaner substitution, then rewrote the core relationship from the inside out. Every move was deliberate. Every symbol had purpose. The room was silent except for the soft drag of chalk across the board. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Whitmore, the man who had built his reputation on certainty, said nothing. By the time Elijah stepped back, the original monster on the board had transformed into something elegant, still difficult, still intimidating, but now complete. Not just solved. Corrected. Elijah placed the chalk down gently. There, he said. If you remove the unstable assumption and rebuild the proof from the conserved symmetry instead, the equation resolves. It's not impossible. It just needed the right entry point. No one breathed. One student in the front row stood up to look closer. Then another. Not because they doubted it, because they couldn't believe it. Whitmore walked to the board like a man approaching a mirror he didn't want to face. He read the final line once. Then again. His jaw tightened. His hand lifted as if to point out an error, but stopped halfway. There wasn't one. The solution was sound. More than sound, it was brilliant. Finally, Whitmore turned around. Where, he said, his voice quieter now, did you learn to do that? Elijah met his eyes. My father cleaned buildings at night, he said. One of them was a university library. He wasn't allowed to take books home, but he could leave them open on the cart while he worked. When I was 12, he started bringing me with him. I sat on the floor between shelves and taught myself from discarded journals, old textbooks, and papers people assumed no one would ever read. The class was frozen. Elijah continued. I found one of your early papers when I was 15. Then another. Then the theorem you abandoned. I've been working on it ever since. Whitmore said nothing. For the first time in that room, the professor looked small. Not because someone had embarrassed him. Because someone had exposed the thing he never expected to be challenged, his assumption about who belonged in the world of genius and who didn't. Elijah picked up his notebook. I stayed quiet, he said, because I came here to learn. Not to prove I deserve to be in the room. Then he paused. But if someone mistakes silence for ignorance, that's their error. Not mine. No one forgot that sentence. By the end of the day, the story had spread across the department. By the end of the week, it had spread across campus. Students whispered about the moment Whitmore's 10-year equation had been solved in front of him by the very student he had tried to belittle. But the part they remembered most wasn't the solution. It was the look on Whitmore's face when he realized that brilliance had been sitting quietly in the back row all semester, watching, listening, waiting. While he had been too blinded by arrogance to see it. And maybe that was the real lesson in the room that day. Not that Elijah Carter was a genius. Not that the professor was wrong. But that talent doesn't always arrive in the package people expect. Genius doesn't always speak first. Sometimes it sits in silence, underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. Until the moment comes when the world leaves it no choice but to stand up, walk to the board, and show everyone exactly who it is.